Picture this. The room is silent, heavy with anticipation. In one corner stands the lightning-fast legend, Bruce Lee, the man whose speed had already stunned fighters across the world. People whispered that no one could touch him, that his movements were faster than the eye could follow. But on this particular day, something unusual happened. Across from him wasn't a young champion, not a towering heavyweight, not even a rival in his prime. Standing calmly, almost peacefully, was a quiet 75-year-old master of Muay Thai. Most people in the room assumed it would be over in seconds. After all, Bruce Lee was young, explosive, and unstoppable. The old man looked thin and weathered, his face marked by decades of training and battles long forgotten. Some spectators even smiled, expecting to witness a quick demonstration of Bruce Lee's famous speed. But what happened next completely shattered that expectation. The bell rang, and Bruce Lee moved first, fast, sharp, and precise. His strikes cut through the air like lightning. Normally, opponents barely lasted moments against that kind of speed. Yet the old Muay Thai master didn't panic. He didn't rush. He didn't even look surprised. He simply stepped aside with calm, effortless patience, as if the storm in front of him meant nothing. Seconds turned into minutes. Bruce attacked again and again, combinations flowing like water, angles shifting, speed increasing. But every time he tried to land something decisive, the old master absorbed the rhythm, redirected the force, and neutralized the attack like a man who had already seen this fight 1,000 times before. 5 minutes passed, then 10. By 15 minutes, the crowd began to whisper. Something was wrong. Bruce Lee, the fighter known for ending fights instantly, was still searching for a clear opening. Meanwhile, the old master's breathing remained slow and controlled, his movements minimal, almost economical, as if he was letting time itself become his greatest weapon. 20 minutes into the challenge, Bruce Lee realized something shocking. He wasn't fighting a weak old man. He was facing 50 years of experience. Every feint Bruce created had already been studied by the old master decades ago. Every explosive burst of speed met a wall of patience and timing that only a lifetime of Muay Thai could produce. And suddenly the room understood a powerful truth about martial arts. Speed can be dangerous, strength can be overwhelming, but wisdom can make even the fastest fighter hesitate. For 25 straight minutes, Bruce Lee pushed harder, faster, sharper, yet the old master stood there like a mountain shaped by time itself. And that is the moment people in the room would remember forever. The day a 75-year-old Muay Thai master showed the world that experience can sometimes be stronger than youth. The day began like many other demonstrations of martial skill, yet the atmosphere in the training hall felt unusually tense. Fighters, students, and spectators filled the room, whispering among themselves while waiting to witness something special. In the center of that attention stood Bruce Lee, a man whose reputation had already spread through martial arts circles like wildfire. His speed, precision, and philosophy had turned him into more than just a fighter. He was becoming a symbol of modern martial arts. People spoke about his movements as if they were something almost supernatural, claiming his punches arrived before opponents even realized he had moved. Many in the room had seen him train. Some had even sparred with him briefly, only to walk away stunned by how quickly he controlled distance and timing. Bruce Lee carried himself with quiet confidence, not arrogance, but the unmistakable certainty of someone who had tested his limits again and again. His philosophy of simplicity and directness had begun reshaping how fighters thought about combat. Instead of rigid forms and long rehearsed sequences, he believed in speed, efficiency, and adaptability. Yet on that particular afternoon, the person standing across from him seemed to represent the complete opposite world. The man waiting calmly on the other side of the mat was a 75-year-old master of Muay Thai. His body was thinner than it once must have been, his shoulders slightly curved with age, and the lines on his face told the story of decades spent inside fighting rings and dusty training camps. He did not look intimidating in the way modern fighters often do. There were no bulging muscles or explosive movements. Instead, there was something quieter about him, something steady that seemed rooted deep beneath the surface. Some of the younger spectators exchanged amused looks when they first saw him step forward. A few whispered that the match would be over almost instantly. After all, Bruce Lee was in the prime of his life, fast, powerful, and famous for overwhelming opponents before they could react. The old master, on the other hand, had already lived through more years than most fighters ever spend training. To many observers, the outcome seemed obvious before the first movement even happened. But those who had spent time around traditional martial arts masters understood something different. In the world of Muay Thai, age did not always mean weakness. Fighters in Thailand often began training as children, accumulating thousands of rounds of sparring before most athletes elsewhere had even begun serious practice. The old master standing before Bruce Lee had spent nearly his entire life studying timing, balance, and distance. His body might have slowed with the passing years, but his understanding of combat had grown deeper with every decade. While the crowd quietly speculated about what was about to happen, Bruce Lee watched his opponent with careful attention. He had never been the kind of martial artist who judged a fighter by appearance alone. He understood that the most dangerous opponents were often the ones who seemed calm and unassuming. Instead of rushing forward or showing impatience, he allowed a moment of silence to settle between them. The old master bowed slightly, a gesture that carried both respect and confidence. Bruce Lee returned the bow. For a brief moment, the entire room seemed to hold its breath. The contrast between the two fighters was striking. On one side stood youthful speed and revolutionary technique. On the other stood decades of traditional experience, shaped through countless fights, injuries, and lessons learned through real combat. It was more than just a sparring match between two individuals. In many ways, it felt like a meeting between generations of martial arts philosophy. Some spectators leaned forward in their seats, eager to witness Bruce Lee demonstrate the explosive speed that had become legendary among martial artists. Stories circulated about how quickly he could strike, how his punches traveled so fast that cameras struggled to capture them. His training methods were unconventional, blending techniques from multiple disciplines into something fluid and unpredictable. The fear. Old Muay Thai master, however, showed no sign of intimidation. His breathing remained slow and measured. His feet settled naturally into a stance that looked simple but perfectly balanced. There was no dramatic preparation, no show of aggression. Instead, he seemed to be observing Bruce Lee with quiet curiosity, like a seasoned teacher watching a talented student. In the corners of the room, whispers continued. Some people expected Bruce Lee to end the challenge almost immediately. Others wondered whether the old master might possess hidden skills that could surprise the audience. The tension slowly grew as both fighters remained still, measuring each other without a single strike thrown. Bruce Lee's mind worked quickly, behind his calm expression. He studied the subtle shifts in the old master's posture, the way his weight rested evenly between both feet, the relaxed positioning of his shoulders and hands. Even at 75 years old, the man's stance carried a sense of stability that could not easily be broken. It was the stance of someone who had spent decades understanding how balance affects every movement in a fight. The old master's eyes were clear and focused. They held none of the nervous energy that younger fighters sometimes carried into competition. Instead, there was patience there, an almost immovable patience that suggested he had nothing to prove and nothing to fear. Bruce Lee respected that. Immediately. He had spent years challenging traditional martial arts systems, criticizing rigid styles that limited adaptability. But he also respected genuine mastery when he saw it. Experience, after all, could not be faked. A signal was given for the sparring to begin. The room fell completely silent. Even those who had been whispering moments earlier now leaned forward, unwilling to miss the first exchange. The air felt charged with expectation as Bruce Lee shifted his weight slightly, preparing to move. Across from him, the old Muay Thai master remained almost perfectly still. His calm presence seemed to slow the moment itself, stretching the silence, before action into something almost dramatic. It was the kind of stillness that only experienced fighters understood, the quiet space where observation becomes more important than movement. Bruce Lee knew that first impressions in a fight could shape everything that followed. A fast opening attack could immediately test an opponent's reactions and reveal weaknesses. His training emphasized intercepting attacks, overwhelming opponents with speed before they could establish control. But the old master appeared completely comfortable with waiting. That patience created an unusual tension. The crowd expected explosive action, yet both fighters seemed content to observe each other for those first precious seconds. Bruce Lee took a small step forward, light on his feet. The movement was subtle, but it signaled that the challenge had truly begun. His body remained relaxed, ready to explode into motion at any moment. Years of disciplined training had given him the ability to shift from stillness to speed faster than most fighters could react. Across from him, the 75-year-old master adjusted his stance by only a fraction. The shift was so minimal that many spectators might have missed it entirely. Yet within that small movement lay decades of accumulated knowledge about distance and positioning. His feet aligned naturally, prepared to move in any direction without unnecessary effort. Bruce Lee noticed that detail immediately. The room watched in silence as the two fighters continued measuring each other, their awareness sharpening with every passing second. It was the kind of moment that only occurs when two highly trained martial artists recognize the skill standing in front of them. One represented youth, innovation, and lightning speed. The other represented patience, endurance, and the quiet authority of a lifetime spent studying combat. At the very moment the sparring truly began, the difference between youth and experience revealed itself in subtle ways that most spectators could not immediately recognize. Bruce Lee moved first, exactly as many expected. His body shifted forward, with that famous explosive precision that had already earned him a reputation among martial artists around the world. His feet glided across the mat with incredible lightness, his shoulders relaxed, his hands alive with small adjustments that signaled the speed he was capable of releasing at any second. Across from him stood the 75-year-old master of Muay Thai, whose posture looked almost deceptively simple. He did not rush to match Bruce Lee's movement. Instead, he allowed Bruce to enter the space slowly, carefully observing the rhythm behind each step. His eyes followed the small shifts of Bruce Lee's shoulders, the tightening of muscles before an attack, the barely noticeable changes in breathing that always came a split second before speed was unleashed. To most people in the room, Bruce Lee looked like a coiled spring ready to explode. The old master looked like a tree standing quietly in the wind. The crowd expected the spring to dominate the tree. Bruce Lee suddenly launched forward, testing distance with a lightning-fast strike. His hand shot forward with a speed that would normally catch opponents off guard, the kind of movement that forced most fighters to react instinctively instead of thinking. Many of Bruce Lee's past sparring partners had described the same experience. By the time they recognized the attack, it was already too late. But the old master did not react with panic. He shifted slightly. It was not a dramatic dodge or a wide, defensive movement. Instead, it was a subtle adjustment of position, just enough for the strike to pass harmlessly through empty space. The motion was small, almost effortless, and yet perfectly timed. Bruce Lee immediately noticed it. His eyes sharpened as he reset his stance. That first exchange had already revealed something important. The old man was not guessing. He was reading the attack before it fully happened. Bruce Lee moved again, this time faster. His footwork became more active, circling slightly to test angles. His philosophy of combat had always emphasized adaptability. If one approach failed, he would change rhythm instantly, forcing opponents into situations they had never practiced. The old Muay Thai master followed those movements calmly. He did not chase Bruce Lee around the mat, nor did he retreat in a defensive panic. Instead, he adjusted his position with minimal effort, always maintaining a distance that made it difficult for Bruce to land anything clean. His stance remained balanced, his weight centered, ready to respond to whichever direction Bruce chose. Crowd began noticing something unusual. Bruce Lee's attacks were fast, astonishingly fast, but the old master seemed to exist half a step ahead of them. Bruce fired another combination, a quick sequence of hand strikes designed to overwhelm an opponent's defense. The attacks flowed naturally, each one blending into the next with smooth efficiency. Bruce Lee's training allowed him to chain movements together so quickly that most fighters struggled to identify where one attack ended and the next began. Yet, again, the old master neutralized the sequence. A small shift of the torso, a slight turn of the shoulder, a quiet step that redirected the entire line of attack. Nothing dramatic, nothing flashy, but each movement arrived exactly when it needed to. Bruce Lee's speed was undeniable, but the old master's timing was something different entirely. Minutes passed, as Bruce Lee continued testing different approaches. He adjusted angles, varied his speed, and changed the rhythm of his attacks. Sometimes he moved quickly, sometimes slowly, sometimes pausing just long enough to bait a reaction. But the old Muay Thai master refused to rush. His experience allowed him to recognize patterns within Bruce Lee's movement. Even when Bruce changed rhythm, the old master understood the deeper structure behind those attacks. Years of fighting had trained his mind to observe subtle signals, shoulder tension, foot pressure, breathing patterns, that younger fighters rarely noticed. Each time Bruce Lee attacked, the old master seemed to respond not to the strike itself, but to the intention behind it. Bruce Lee increased his speed further. His movements became sharper, more aggressive, forcing the tempo higher. His philosophy of combat encouraged directness and interception, striking along the shortest path before opponents could establish control. Several spectators leaned forward in amazement as Bruce Lee unleashed a rapid burst of strikes. For a moment, it seemed inevitable that one of them would land. Yet the old master remained composed. He did not attempt to match Bruce Lee's speed. Instead, he relied on positioning and anticipation. By moving slightly before each attack fully developed, he reduced the need for dramatic reactions. His body flowed gently around the incoming strikes like water moving around stones. Bruce Lee paused briefly. That pause revealed a new level of focus. He had already recognized something unusual about the situation. His speed alone was not enough to break through the old master's defense. The man's understanding of timing and distance created a barrier that raw quickness could not easily penetrate. Bruce Lee began studying his opponent more carefully. Every experienced fighter knows that speed without strategy eventually reaches its limits. Bruce Lee understood that better than most. His philosophy emphasized constant learning, adapting to whatever reality the fight presented. He moved again, testing a different angle. The old master adjusted again. Always calm. Always precise. Always exactly where he needed to be. The spectators slowly realized they were witnessing something deeper than a simple contest of physical ability. Bruce Lee represented explosive modern technique, refined through intense training and innovative thinking. The old master represented a lifetime of traditional knowledge, built through thousands of encounters inside fighting rings and training grounds. Speed and experience had entered into a quiet dialogue. Bruce Lee stepped forward again, his focus now completely locked on the old master's subtle movements. Instead of attacking immediately, he observed how the man distributed his weight, how his breathing remained steady even under pressure. The old master's patience never wavered. He allowed Bruce Lee to circle, to probe, to search for weaknesses. His posture remained balanced, his feet ready to move with minimal effort. Decades of Muay Thai training had refined his instincts until every motion served a clear purpose. Bruce Lee launched another quick strike. Again, the old master slipped, just outside its range. Another combination followed. Another precise adjustment neutralized it. What fascinated the more experienced martial artists watching the match was how little energy the old master seemed to use. Bruce Lee's attacks were powerful and fast, requiring explosive bursts of motion. The old master, however, conserved his energy carefully, moving only when absolutely necessary. This economy of motion came directly from decades of experience. Young fighters often relied on speed and strength to overwhelm opponents. Older masters learned something different, the art of doing less while achieving more. Bruce Lee's attacks continued to test every possible opening. He varied timing, shifted angles, increased pressure, and accelerated his combinations. Each change forced the old master to adapt, and each time, the old master responded with calm efficiency. Bruce Lee realized that he was not facing a simple defensive fighter. He was facing a man who had spent half a century refining the ability to read combat itself. Every strike Bruce attempted was being studied, understood, and redirected before it could achieve its full effect. The difference between speed and experience had become unmistakably clear. Speed allowed Bruce Lee to attack first. Experience allowed the old master to already know what was coming. As the sparring continued, a deeper pattern slowly began revealing itself to everyone watching. At first, the spectators had been fascinated by the speed of Bruce Lee, the way he exploded forward, the sharpness of his strikes, the constant movement of his feet. But as the minutes passed, something even more fascinating began drawing their attention. The strategy of the 75-year-old master of Muay Thai. He was not simply defending. He was controlling the fight without appearing to do very much at all. From the outside, it looked almost effortless. Bruce Lee would move quickly, testing an opening with a strike or a feint, and the old master would shift just enough to remove himself from danger. The movements were so small that some people in the crowd barely noticed them, yet every adjustment was perfectly timed. His feet rarely left the ground dramatically. Instead, they slid lightly across the surface with quiet precision, keeping his balance centered and his stance stable. Decades of Muay Thai training had shaped the way he moved, teaching him that balance was the foundation of every successful defense. Young fighters often reacted with speed and muscle. The old master reacted with timing. Whenever Bruce Lee launched a combination, the old man did not attempt to block every strike directly. Instead, he let the attacks pass through space that he had already vacated a fraction of a second earlier. His body turned slightly, shoulders rotating just enough to redirect the line of force. To someone unfamiliar with martial arts, it might have looked like Bruce Lee was simply missing. But the truth was far more sophisticated. The old master was guiding those misses. Each defensive movement forced Bruce Lee to adjust again, to rethink his next attack, to expend energy chasing an opening that seemed to disappear every time it appeared. The strategy was not about stopping Bruce Lee's speed, it was about dissolving it. The old master understood that explosive fighters relied on rhythm. Speed created pressure, pressure created reactions, and those reactions opened the door for finishing strikes. By refusing to react in the expected way, the old master disrupted that rhythm completely. Bruce Lee would surge forward with rapid combinations. The old master would step slightly offline. Bruce Lee would shift angles to trap him. The old master would pivot calmly, placing himself outside the line of attack once again. Each movement looked simple, but every motion contained decades of accumulated experience. The old man had spent his life studying how fighters moved, how they attacked when confident, how they behaved when frustrated. He could feel Bruce Lee's intention even before the strike fully formed, and that awareness allowed him to remain patient. Patience was perhaps the most powerful weapon in his strategy. Younger fighters often believed that constant action was necessary to dominate a fight. The old master understood that waiting could be even more powerful. By refusing to rush, he forced Bruce Lee to carry the burden of initiating every exchange. That subtle shift in responsibility slowly changed the rhythm of the sparring match. Bruce Lee was the one moving more, attacking more, thinking more actively about how to break through the defense. The old master simply observed. His breathing remained slow and controlled, almost meditative. While Bruce Lee's chest rose and fell with the effort of repeated bursts of speed, the old master maintained a steady rhythm that conserved his energy. It was not laziness, it was discipline. In Muay Thai training camps, fighters learned early that endurance could decide the outcome of long battles. Efficient movement allowed experienced fighters to last far longer than younger opponents who relied too heavily on explosive strength. That philosophy shaped the old master's approach. Now, instead of clashing directly with Bruce Lee's power, he allowed time itself to become part of his strategy. Every minute that passed gave him more information about Bruce Lee's habits and patterns. He noticed how Bruce shifted his weight before certain attacks. He observed how Bruce Lee preferred to close distance quickly after circling. He recognized the subtle rhythm changes that preceded faster combinations. These details accumulated quietly inside the old master's mind. And with each passing minute, his understanding of Bruce Lee grew clearer. Bruce Lee sensed this as well. His attacks became more varied as he attempted to disrupt the old master's calm observation. Sometimes he advanced aggressively, sometimes he paused to test reactions, sometimes he changed the angle of attack entirely. But the old master remained remarkably composed. When Bruce Lee accelerated his pace, the old master slowed his movements even more, forcing Bruce to confront empty space instead of solid targets. When Bruce Lee hesitated, the old master held his ground, refusing to give away position unnecessarily. The strategy revolved around control. Not control through domination, but control through balance and awareness. Many spectators began noticing that Bruce Lee rarely managed to force the old master completely out of position. No matter how quickly Bruce attacked, the old man's stance returned to balance almost immediately. His feet knew exactly where to go. His shoulders stayed relaxed. His center of gravity remained stable. It was the kind of stability that could only come from a lifetime of repetition. Thousands of training sessions, thousands of sparring rounds, countless hours spent refining how the body moved under pressure. Bruce Lee's attacks continued, sharp and intelligent, but the old master absorbed the pressure without allowing the fight to spiral into chaos. Instead of reacting emotionally to the speed of the exchanges, he maintained a calm, analytical approach. Every movement had a purpose. Every pause had meaning. Even the way he held his guard carried subtle signals designed to influence Bruce Lee's choices. Sometimes the old master left small openings deliberately, inviting Bruce Lee to attack in a particular direction. When the attack came, he was already prepared for it, guiding the motion away from its intended target. This was not simply defense. It was quiet manipulation of the entire flow of the fight. Bruce Lee began to realize that he was being studied in real time. Each attempt to break through the defense revealed a little more about his strategy, giving the old master additional information. That realization forced Bruce Lee to think even more carefully. He slowed down slightly, watching the old master's reactions with greater attention. Instead of launching constant attacks, he started probing more deliberately, trying to understand the structure of the defense he faced. The old master welcomed that shift. Patience was his natural environment, while younger fighters often grew restless during quiet moments. The old master felt completely comfortable allowing silence to stretch between exchanges. His decades of experience had taught him that time could reveal more than aggression ever could. The spectators sensed that the sparring had evolved into something deeper than a test of physical skill. It had become a contest of understanding. Bruce Lee searched for patterns in the old master's movements. The old master quietly studied Bruce Lee's intentions. Two different philosophies of combat were unfolding in front of the audience. One built around explosive speed and adaptability, the other rooted in patience, balance, and observation. The old master's strategy continued unfolding with quiet confidence. He did not rush forward to attack Bruce Lee directly. He did not attempt to overpower him. Instead, he allowed Bruce Lee's own energy to define the pace of the encounter, while he guided the direction of that energy through careful positioning and subtle timing. His defensive mastery slowly shaped the entire rhythm of the sparring match. By the time the sparring had stretched far beyond what anyone expected, the atmosphere inside the room had completely changed. At the beginning, many spectators had arrived believing they would witness another quick demonstration of speed from Bruce Lee. They expected explosive movement, a few lightning-fast exchanges, and a clear display of dominance. But what they were now watching had evolved into something much deeper, something that forced everyone present to reconsider what true mastery in martial arts really meant. The 75-year-old master of Muay Thai still stood across from Bruce Lee with the same calm posture he had shown from the beginning. His breathing remained slow and measured, his shoulders relaxed, his stance balanced as if he had barely moved at all. Time, which many people assumed would weaken him, seemed to have strengthened something inside him instead. Bruce Lee, meanwhile, had already pushed through multiple waves of speed and strategy. His attacks had tested angles, rhythm, timing, and distance. Each movement had been sharp and calculated, driven by the same philosophy that had made him famous among martial artists. Yet the deeper the exchange continued, the more something subtle began to reveal itself. Strength alone was not the deciding factor. Speed alone was not the deciding factor. Even brilliant technique was not always enough. What the audience slowly began realizing was that martial arts at its highest level was not simply about winning an exchange of strikes. It was about understanding the nature of combat itself. Bruce Lee paused briefly, studying the old master once more. His breathing had become slightly heavier now, not from exhaustion alone, but from the intense mental concentration required to solve the puzzle standing in front of him. Every time he believed he had discovered a weakness, the old master seemed to dissolve that opportunity with a quiet adjustment of position. The older fighter did not look triumphant. He did not look competitive in the aggressive sense. Instead, he looked almost like a teacher calmly guiding a difficult lesson. That lesson was unfolding not through words, but through movement. Bruce Lee stepped forward again, initiating another careful exchange. His strike still carried speed and precision, yet there was now a deeper layer of respect in the way he approached the old master. The early confidence of overwhelming dominance had transformed into something more thoughtful. Each strike now carried a question, and each defensive movement from the old master carried an answer. The spectators watching began to notice something else as well. The longer the sparring continued, the clearer it became that experience had shaped the old master's awareness in ways that younger fighters rarely achieved. He was not reacting to individual strikes alone. He was sensing the entire rhythm of Bruce Lee's intentions. Years of combat had refined that awareness until it functioned almost instinctively. When Bruce Lee shifted his weight slightly before attacking, the old master already understood what direction the next strike would take. When Bruce Lee attempted to change angles rapidly, the old master recognized the pattern behind the movement and positioned himself accordingly. It was not magic. It was memory, a lifetime of encounters stored inside the body. Every fight the old master had experienced, every opponent he had faced, every mistake he had corrected over decades of training, had built a library of understanding that now guided his movements effortlessly. Bruce Lee respected that deeply. His philosophy had always emphasized constant learning, the belief that martial arts was a path of growth rather than a rigid system. Standing in front of the old Muay Thai master, that philosophy became even more real. Because what Bruce Lee faced was not simply a 75-year-old man, he faced 50 years of accumulated lessons. The room grew quieter as the realization spread among the spectators. This was not the type of contest that produced a dramatic knockout or a sudden victory. Instead, it was revealing something far more meaningful about the nature of martial arts itself. Youth brought speed. Training built technique, but time created wisdom. The old master's movements continued with the same quiet efficiency. He conserved energy, moved only when necessary, and maintained his balance regardless of how quickly Bruce Lee attempted to shift the pace. His understanding of distance allowed him to remain safe without appearing defensive. Bruce Lee moved again, attempting a faster sequence designed to disrupt the calm rhythm. The old master adjusted smoothly. Bruce Lee shifted angles again. The old master pivoted lightly, maintaining the same balanced stance. Each exchange carried a subtle message. Martial arts was not about defeating another person through force alone. It was about understanding the invisible structures beneath every movement. Timing, balance, rhythm, awareness. Those structures grew stronger with experience. Many of the younger fighters watching the sparring began to feel something unexpected. At first, they had admired Bruce Lee's speed and power, imagining that those qualities alone defined greatness. Now they were witnessing something equally impressive unfolding through patience and restraint. The old master was demonstrating that mastery could appear quiet. It could appear simple. It could even appear effortless. But beneath that calm surface existed decades of relentless discipline. Bruce Lee understood that better than anyone else in the room. His own journey had been built on thousands of hours of training, experimentation, and reflection. Yet even he could see that the old master's understanding came from a depth of experience that could not be rushed. Time itself had been the teacher. The sparring continued as both fighters moved carefully around each other. Bruce Lee remained sharp and focused, adjusting his tactics while maintaining the respectful intensity that defined his approach to martial arts. The old master continued responding with patience. No wasted movement, no unnecessary aggression, just precise awareness guiding every step. The lesson unfolding in that room extended far beyond the two men standing on the mat. It revealed a fundamental truth about the path of martial arts. Skill was not built overnight. True mastery required patience, humility, and the willingness to learn continuously throughout life. The old master had spent decades walking that path. Bruce Lee, still young but already brilliant, stood somewhere earlier along the same road, and in that moment their sparring became less about victory and more about understanding the journey itself. The spectators no longer watched with the expectation of a quick result. Instead, they observed with quiet respect as two generations of martial arts philosophy moved together in a complex conversation of speed, patience, experience, and awareness. Each step carried meaning. Each pause revealed insight. Each exchange reminded everyone present that the greatest lessons in martial arts often appeared not in moments of domination but in moments of understanding.